Thank you very much for photo wings. So just to remind everybody of the format, I'm sure many of you have been to these talks before, but there will be a chance to ask questions through the Q&A box where you can type in your questions, and I will moderate those and feed those through to the panel at the end of the discussion. But usually each presenter will talk for 15-20 minutes, something like that, and then we'll have a bit of discussion and Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Maria Teresa to introduce our panelists and to begin the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for everyone joining us today. This is the second talk of a new series called Visualizing the Climate Crisis, which explores the potential and the role of contemporary photography that we try to pair with the different disciplines in order to address the multi-layered theme of climate change. We've been working for a few years now with Seven and UAL, University of the Arts London, as Everything is Connected. Sorry, maybe you know me, but I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Maria Teresa Salvati, director and founder of everythingisconnected.eu, which is a platform for addressing the issue of climate change from a communication point of view and trying to create a new paradigm for communicating climate change and trying to involve a different audience, wider publics, and work with visual arts together with other disciplines. In fact, this series will see visual journalists and doing evidence-based and research-informed reporting on climate issues. And this is the second one, and the first one was about ocean acidification, where we paired a documentary photographer with a scientist. This time, today, we will talk about virtual water, and I have the pleasure to have here on the panel Francesca Greco, which is a PhD in water and food politics, and Uwe H. Martin, which is a slow photojournalist. Together, we'll try to deepen the topic and really trying to understand how, first of all, what is virtual water and how can be visualized. So how visual storytellers and scientists, in this case, can work together to tell the whole story and try to understand if it's a good or a bad thing. How can people become aware of their eating and buying habits, and so in a way conscious of their choices, and so changing in trying to understand what is the best way to reduce the impact on the planet. So I'll do a brief introduction of what is virtual water, and then I'll leave the word to Francesca Greco. So virtual water is a concept that was coined by John Anthony Allen in 1993. And this concept refers to the quantity of fresh water used in products, services, and processes that people buy and use, and which often is unseen by the end users. So where our food comes from, it's obviously that we are in a moment of the history where the topic of water is a very sensitive topic, which leads also to like political geopolitical like issues in a way. And so we consume much more water than we effectively see in the products and the services we buy. Today, we probably will mostly focus on food in terms of virtual water, but it's good to mention that the fresh water is also used for production of food, like clothing, technology, and services. And so, of course, the concept of virtual water is also refers also to the idea that countries that are short on water can also save domestic water by importing food. So it's an important topic. Francesca, thank you very much for joining us. As I mentioned, she will introduce better about the very deep project, like research she conducts for many years now on the topic. And so if you could tell us more about what virtual water is. And 1 second, you're sharing already the screen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, one second, Francesca, can I just finish?
Sure.
You are also the co-author of the book, The Water We Eat, which you've written with Marta Antonelli. You've seen that in the book, you analyze the relationship between water and food security. And obviously, as I was saying before, it demonstrates that most of the world economies lack sufficient water resources to secure the population food requirements. And so virtual water is very important. So could you tell us more about the concept and the research you are conducting? Is this phenomenon of importing food and so for the process of producing goods and services a good or bad thing? This is a question I've been thinking about a lot, and the bad and good for whom, and what will be the alternative if we don't have enough water, for example, like in Italy, but also in other countries. So thank you very much for joining us, and the word to you.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm very happy to be here today, and I would like to start first of all showing you how I got interested in this topic and how I got interested in the work of Tony Allen, and why this concept it's so interesting in general. After 2 years from his death, and after a long reflection on the life of Tony Allen, what I understood from his work is that he indeed understood the water out of the thirst. A kind of quotation of Emily Dickinson's poem. So he understood the importance of the lack of water in the movement of food trade and the water embedded in it, while he started his geography work in Libya. So then he got interested in the entire Middle East and North Africa regions, notably the ones importing the majority of their food from abroad. So he understood water from scarcity. Tony Allen learned to water from his experience with water scarcity itself. So in the end, this is how I got interested in the topic. And me too, I understood that when I was in my 20s, I went to Jordan and started traveling back and forth from Amman to the border between the Jordan and Saudi Arabia, searching for the irrigated fields of crops in the middle of the desert. So I was searching for the water. But which water? The underground water. So what brought me there? I still don't know, but I started being interested in water politics around the year 2000 in a country where a university course in water and water politics simply did not exist, Italy, and still doesn't exist. So why virtual water is important? Because it deals with things you don't see. It deals with things we are not aware of. So the issue of scarcity is the thing that brought Tony Allen to study food imports and to discover this concept called virtual water. And I would like to quote a very popular children writer, Gianni Rodari, an Italian writer, who once wrote, "Children, you should try to learn how to do difficult things." I really believe that virtual water is one of those difficult things that we should try to learn, we should try to understand. So for me, water is a very complex, and it was much more complex than expected as a topic when I try to look at it under the complexity lenses and the complexity point of view. And the answer was water is invisible. 99% of the liquid water which is in our planet and available to us is under our feet. So we don't see it, okay? And the 70% of the water we use is in our food. So in my life as a scientist and communicator or a project coordinator, I always try to uncover the silence and the invisible aspects of water. Women silently carrying a bucket filled with water on the top of their heads in the middle of the night in Ghana. This is what I saw. This is what I try to communicate. Water beneath our feet, underground water, and virtual water, which is the water needed to produce our food, but that we don't see. So the invisibility of water is what basically attracted me to the topic. And the concept of virtual water is coupled with the concept of water footprint. And it's important to understand that not all water drops are the same. That's why I would like to answer to your question with this concept. Is virtual water good or bad? It depends from the quality of virtual water. So for example, I try to articulate more. Not all water drops are the same is a very important concept to understand, because water can be renewable or not renewable. Water can come from a water scarce area or from a water rich area, okay? So regarding the many qualitative aspects of virtual water, we should look at the main definition of virtual water itself that Alan borrowed from Professor Malin Falkenmark. So in every food product that we eat, there are basically two components of virtual water, the blue water and the green water. So these are the main definitions that Tony Allen used. The blue water component is the water that we consume through withdrawals, the things that we call withdrawals. We pump water, we divert water from rivers and lakes in order to irrigate our food. This is the so-called blue water, the water that we can see, we can touch, we usually call it fresh water. This is also providing supply not only for food production, but also for industry. For example, an industry producing leather shoes, it's using fresh water. Washing ourselves, we are using fresh water in our households, or refrigerating electricity power plants. This is the fresh water use. So blue water comes from rivers, lakes, or we can just pump it from groundwater aquifer. This is blue water. Then there is the green water component, which is the big revolution that Malin Falkenmark brought, and which was borrowed by Tony Allen, and changed the way agriculture and water account is today perceived in the world. So green water is the water coming from the rainfall. It does not arrive into the aquifer, does not percolate down, so it does not become blue water. It provides water for the life of all plants and cultivated crops in the world, and it remains into the soil moisture of land and allows the evapotranspiration of plants. So unlike blue water that can be conveyed in big reservoirs, channels, pumped out, moved away from its agrological unit, and so far and so forth, you cannot move rainwater. You cannot move rain. Okay, so there is an alternative use of blue water, which is not allowed to green water. So the blue water has got a higher opportunity cost because you can do different things with that. You can use it for the agricultural sector, for the domestic sector, for the industrial sector. You cannot do this with green water. So you cannot do this with rain. Okay, so this is why virtual water is not the same. So some crops grow with a larger quantity of rain compared to others, and therefore they need less irrigation. And exporting this type of crops, which are green water intense, for example, to the Middle East and North Africa, is like moving rain, moving the rain which was falling in another place to a place which is water scarce. Okay, so you are moving rain when it does not rain. So remembering that agriculture represents the 70% of water withdrawals worldwide, if water scarce countries can import food, instead of irrigating their lands, they can free some of the blue water in their countries and move it to other sectors. They can give it to their domestic use or for their industrial use. So after Toliana conceived the virtual water having these two components, green and blue, then the water footprint indicators also added the gray water component, which is representing pollution. So we need to calculate how many liters of water we need to dilute polluted water to bring it back to its quality for good for human consumption. So we have three components of the water footprint: blue, green, and gray. So despite the fact that there is an entire discourse about fertilizers, use of soil, consumption of soil, pesticides, and other issues around extensive agricultural development per se, and there's no space to talk about it here, talking about virtual water, you can avoid harm when exporting virtual water from green water abundant areas 2 water scarce areas in terms of water saving. In all other cases, it has been found that virtual water is currently being exported from water scarce areas, not only to water scarce regions, but sometimes also to water rich areas. So this is possible due to a series of factors which are driving food trade, to which virtual water is intrinsically linked. So I hope I have answered your question. So yes, there is bad virtual water. And this is one of the main topics of my future research.
Amazing, thank you. Very insightful. Okay, so okay, I thought you wanted to go ahead with the presentation, so we can pass it to
Maybe further on.
What, sorry?
Maybe further on.
Okay, cool. So thank you, Uwe, for joining us today. Uwe is considered himself a slow storyteller, slow visual journalist. So it would be great to tell us why you define yourself as slow storyteller. Could you tell us more about your research practice? And among all the other projects you've been working in the past years, you've also worked on a project called 1 Pound of Almonds, made in California. And I've been reading a little bit of shocking numbers about it. And one is that, for example, we need around 12 liters of water to grow 1 almond, which is pretty shocking. And of course, so the agriculture business in California, we know is pretty massive, but apparently counts around 78,000 farms and spread on around 100,000 square kilometers of land. So it's really big numbers. You've also produced a site-specific installation to make people aware of the water footprint issues, and of course, which in theory led to a humankind reflection on the responsibility of humans on the Anthropocene. So I'll be curious to tell us more about your research and what you do. And I don't know if you have ever also measured the impact of the installation or something that you learned from that installation that somehow could be shared and could be useful for us to hear. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super happy about this conversation here. So let me see if I can show the presentation here and here. Okay, so my wife, Frauke Huber, and I, we have been documenting social and environmental consequences of global agriculture since 2007. And we do so because agriculture is one of the main drivers of climate change, of species extinction, of water depletion, of erosion, deforestation, desertification, and so on and so forth. And it is also the largest industry in the world. It employs more people than anything else that we do. So the way we eat and we grow our food and we use our land is probably the most transformative thing that human beings are collectively doing through the planet. And if we don't solve the way we grow our food, we will not solve any of the other issues connected to it or secondary issues such as climate change. We don't have a chance to change that. So, but most people don't understand how fragile our food systems are. And so we have been living with farmers and fishers and indigenous peoples, rangers, pastoralists, interviewed scientists, activists, industry spokesperson, activists, and so on and so forth for the last many years. And what is important is that we see farmers as much as experts than somebody with a PhD or a professor or whoever, because they have their fingers in the ground. They have been living their land and working with their land. And so what we are doing is, and that starts to this discussion of how can you show a complex issue, is we are spending a lot of time spending often months or years with the same people, or return again and again to the same region to document them. And we do that again and again, so the other aspect of the slow journalism approach is that we're trying to build publication bridges to reach many people, but also to reach people deep. So, for example, like we publish things in magazines such as Geo, or there's a science magazine here called Science Notes, where we write the text and we do the photography and everything. And normally it takes about 15 minutes to read these stories, roughly 10, 15 minutes. And we also show things as web documentaries or on iPad apps or stuff like that, where you combine photography with film, with graphics, with other things. Here the story takes about 30 minutes to watch. Then we show other stuff in our own LandRush iPad app, where you can connect different chapters and move between the one and the next chapter. So you start to see interconnections between very far and away areas that are worlds apart and yet connected through this thread of food. We also do linear web documentaries like multimedia stories. But then the most important thing we do is that we do this multi-channel video installations. In these installations, there are kind of like fragmented narrators in space, and the visitors that come in there, instead of being presented with a linear story, they become co-authors of meaning in here. So instead of listening like 3 minutes to this one expert and then 5 minutes to the farmers, and then they can really deep down onto the screens and listen deeply into one position and then see another position at the same time. And as you see, there's all the screens at the same time. So you can get a feeling for the interconnectedness of all the worlds and build your own story here. And the other thing we are doing is, because obviously these exhibitions are often not very accessible, they're normally in big cities and big museums and things like that, we created our own book, which is an analog digital hybrid. And so it's not only a book that shows you like the pictures and takes you on a journey through the stories told by the farmers and fishers and so on themselves, but it also opens up an archive with over 57 films. So that takes about 14 hours to then go through all of them. When we talk about virtual water, a very important part, what we have been working on since 2014, so the last roughly 9 years, is we have been looking at water issues in the American West. We started out to look at impacts of agriculture of the ongoing drought in California's Central Valley. Then we spent a few years going up and down the Colorado River, and also working now on documenting the Salton Sea, which is drying up. It's the largest lake in California, drying up, creating a huge dust bowl. We even bought a house there because we will document that the next 15 to 20 years. One of the central issues in California, and you already mentioned that, was this question of almonds, right? Because in the Central Valley, about 80% of all the almonds grow there. And
sorry to interrupt you, Uwe. Uwe, yes. Sorry to interrupt you. Your voice comes a little bit scratched. I don't know if it's the headphones. Try to remove it, because we can't hear. I don't know if everyone else, but sometimes your voice is a bit broken. We don't hear it at all, you know. So maybe you have to turn off the. No.
Hello, do you hear me? Yes, yeah. Now you hear me again? Okay, yeah. Is it better?
Try to talk, try to speak.
Yes, I do. Do you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, I'll give it a chance here. So over 80% of the world's almonds grow in California, which suffers from regular drought. The problem there is that, like, this one single almond takes 12 liters, and 1 pound of these almonds use about 1,230 gallons of water to grow. Gallon is like 3.7 or 3.8 liters. And so the problem was we have shown this story in magazines before, we did movies about it, we did like this multi-channel installations, but it was really difficult to make it tangible so that people really can feel what does it mean to have 12 liters in a single almond, right? We cannot feel that. I mean, we can show a glass, right? Okay, so that's not enough for one almond. And so we came up with this project called 1 pound of almond, and it looked like that. So we basically had a little column at the shore of the Salton Sea, and on top of that column was a little glass with 1 pound of almonds. And all around it, we placed 1,230 gallon jugs filled with water. And so you could walk on this narrow trail in the center and walk to this thing, and then all around you, like 20 meters in each direction around you, or 15 meters, you had like this gallon. So you were standing in the field of water that was needed to grow this few almonds. And that proved to be very interesting. And of course, many problems are raised with that. Is do you really want to use 1,230 gallon jugs plastic for an art project, right? That could be really detrimental to the message. Selected all of them used. And then what we also did is we decided to fill them not with fresh water, and then what do you do with that, right? You could water your garden, but it will take a while. But we fetch them from the Salton Sea. So connecting those locations, the Central Valley in California and the Salton Sea in Southern California through this installation. And so another thing then arose that if you want to fill it, like the problem of almonds in California is not so much that they take a lot of water. Many other crops do as well, right? And like not to speak of meat and dairy and so on, they take even more water. It's horrible. But the problem is that they harden the demand for water. So in a time of drought, because it's a tree, you cannot fallow it, like tomatoes or rice or corn or whatever. You can not water it when you have a drought. But with almonds, that's not possible, because the trees would die. And so it leads to something called demand hardening. And so then what farmers do is, instead of using this irrigation water, this blue water that we talked about, they go and pump water from underground. And so that brings a lot of problems to the region. And we decided to fetch the water here by hand to make one thing visible, and that is that we not only are water blind, but we are very much energy blind. We have each one of us has a whole army of free energy slaves working for us every second of the day in form of fossil fuels or in forms of like also electricity we use and so on and so forth. And so like getting this water for those almonds normally takes about a few seconds by a big diesel pump, right? But it took us 13 hours to fetch the water for these almonds. And so also showing like this energy slaves, the concept of energy slaves that Buckminster Fuller came up with. And so you asked me about the impact. What is amazing is that, I mean, I think we have a lot of journalists here and people are telling stories in that way. What we always see is that people, once you do an installation, they spend so much more time really diving into it. We have much deeper conversations there. People start thinking and building their own stories. And so that is super helpful with that. Let me see how to, where's my, okay, here we go.
Okay.
Sorry for the glitch in the end.
No, it's okay. Actually, I don't know if you can try and solve the problem with the earphones, because the voice wasn't really clear, but we managed to hear everything you wanted to say. So thank you very much. It's so insightful to hear what you guys are saying. Obviously, well, from my point of view, that the climate change issues it's a lot. When we talk about public engagement, we talk a lot about perception and communication. So it's very interesting to understand, for example, Francesca, from a scientific point of view, what do you think is the message we should convey to people in order for them not only to be aware, but also understand in what ways can they be engaged and what specific actions they can put in place to change or to improve the situation. 1 second, let me finish. To change the situation. So considering we are talking about big political corporation, like policy making issues, and we're talking about business owners, big industries, and obviously it's a geopolitical issue. What is, in your opinion, the role of the actions of the wider public? So is it realistic or is it fair to say that if the public acts in a certain way, we can tangibly see some improvements in terms of the global food production chain and water usage? And once people are aware of the issues, what they can really, are they free to choose and to do some things that will really impact globally on these massive issues we are talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it is essential to separate between personal action and political action. Even though personal is political and political is personal, there are water actions that an individual cannot do. I can't build a dam or a desalination plant. Okay, so it is really essential to distinguish between things we can do and things we cannot do personally, but we can ask for it. So mobilizing our political pressure, political power, raising awareness among civil society, and advocate for it. So regarding policymakers, water is indeed a geopolitical subject. Water is intrinsically linked to power. Mobilizing water means mobilizing political power. So the entire discussion around world water disputes, the Nile, the Jordan River, and all the transboundary water of the world revolves around who gets water, why, and how. And this is a quote from Mark Zedun from the London Water Research Group. But the United Nations have developed some rules around which international water law should regulate water sharing among nations and regions. However, these rules are not binding. And water inequality and water injustice is still practiced at the international level, infringing not only the international water law, but also the human right to water of entire sectors of population around the world. So regarding the private sector, large acquisition of land and water are producing large virtual water flows from poor countries to affluent countries. Land and water grabbing is an issue, and it is mainly caused by a non-regulated private sector being able to mobilize large quantities of irrigation water thanks to their financial capital. So is this fair? Is this going to be regulated at some point by an international regime on water use? Arjen Okstra, the promoter of the water footprint indicator, proposed the idea of water caps, some limits to water withdrawals from each hydrological basin according to its condition of water scarcity and protection of its ecosystemic function. So each river has got an ecosystemic function which should work. So withdrawals should have a limit. He was totally ignored. So if you think about what people can do, again, individually and collectively, there are many roads to ensure just and fair water use for all in this planet, including animals and plants in this planet. But as individual, we in the privileged global north should get interested in initiatives such as Fair Water Footprint, which I suggest you to Google. And in general, we should be interested how food is produced and from where. So the example of almond from California is one of those. So choosing a low water footprint when possible. Collectively, we should put pressure on our government and private sector to respect water, avoid pollution, avoid overexploitation, and help farmers help farmers to protect our most precious resource, because they are the one using the 70% of it. So regarding how people are aware of the water footprint, poor do not have food choices. So we have the privilege of being the global north, which is aware of our water footprint and our environmental impact of food. But the majority of people do not have even the choice regarding their food and the impact of their food on their environment. So we can do a lot, but still we are privileged. And yeah, slow food is telling us that just good and clean food choices should be available for all and not just for the rich.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up the issue about, in a way, climate issues, climate justice. But, you know, it's I think it's very important for those people working in communicating and creating awareness and public engagement to really be to have a clear idea what we're trying to tell to people, because it's very difficult for people not only to understand the topic, but also to feel free to choose. So if we involve millions of people in acting in a different way, we should be able to tell that, okay, if we all do together something, the situation will improve. But I don't think we are still in the condition to say that. So obviously, it's almost like a I don't feel there is a complete freedom even after the awareness stage. But it's definitely something I think we should talk more about it and really be like doing joint efforts in order to understand what is exactly that we can possibly do all together. So thank you, Francesca. The question, next question for Uwe. What's your relationship to science? You work in research as well. You're pretty interdisciplinary storyteller. Do you question yourself whether your projects will achieve some tangible results? And do you question yourself about what is the message you want to convey and what people will do about it? Or do you even measure what you do? What do you think is the role, for example, for photography and visual representation, or even interdisciplinary project, as you were sharing before, in this complex geopolitical and climate issue?
Do you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, lucky. We tested it earlier and then they gave up. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, so I'm coming from a traditional design, photography, journalism background. I don't have any background in science, which makes it really challenging to go into these topics. And over years, I have slowly been crawling into it and digging myself in. The beautiful thing is, and of course, I mean, I do question like the research all the time, right? And the reason we stay so long, besides being able to tell better story, hopefully, is that the greatest gift that we can get is that we figure out after reading all these books and reading all the stories, and then you go on the ground, and then you suddenly meet people, and you figure out on the ground that what you thought the story was is only part of the story, and is only part of the truth, because every book you read, every study you read is always secondary information, right? Somebody else has interpreted it already. And so the best thing that happens to us is when we are there long enough to figure out we have been only partially right. And so then we change it and then we learn from it. And so so this is this great gift that photography gives me, to be able to go there and talk to people and ask amazing scientists and farmers to share their work, right? And I don't even pay tuition for it. I'm like this ever student and can just ask all the dumb questions to really intelligent people, and then trying to build this bridge and translating what I learned from the experts to lay people who don't know anything, who have never heard about virtual water, right? Or or the effects of like how much it takes to grow some food. And so I think that as a journalist, that is very much my role. And of course, I always try to think about what questions might arise from what we do, but very often it's not my responsibility in the end. I don't have it under control. I can do as much as I can, but what people draw from it is always different. So for example, like I've been now constantly people who'd ask me like, oh, should I stop eating almonds, right? Or then you have like, and then other people attack us for even shining light on almonds with this 1 pound of almonds project, because they blame us for distracting from the much larger issue of meat and dairy. Well, yes, would we do the same if we would say, oh, there has been, I don't know, labor get treated badly in Europe, and then we say, oh, don't worry about it, people in Bangladesh get treated much worse, right? Nobody would ever do that when it comes to this, but in the moment it comes to food, there's always this blame game between the different religious fractions, that the one are for this, the one are for the other. And so I think what we do, and that works better in the exhibitions than it works in magazines, because you just don't have the space there, is to really start a conversation and start people to make up their own minds and learn. And what we see there and what we get from feedback from the people who visit that is that they really understand that there are no easy fixes and no easy answers. Also, many people want that, right? But they are not there. And in the exhibition and in the installations, people understand the complexity and then are more willing to actually talk about systemic issues, because we really need to change the food systems and all the subsidies that go into there and so on and so forth. So I think all we can do as visual storytellers is to start a conversation, and then hopefully people will dig deeper and talk to the real experts.
Thank you, Uwe. You raised a very important topic. I think the society has made this exceptional achievement of putting back the responsibility to the individuals, and also putting individuals one against the other. Sometimes you feel guilty if you eat one piece of meat because, you know, it maybe comes from local farmers, and they point you as you are the problem of the climate change. So yeah, I think it's we have to be. When I say it's an issue of perception and communication, is like it's so complex that we don't have control, of course, but there is many people have completely different understanding and knowledge and information and access to information. So it's all left to, you know, political point of view, or where you live, or if it's something happened to you, or the people you're connected to. So we can't find still a common language that really is able to bring to the right people. And when we say the right people, we mean like the large public. Those people often don't have access to this kind of information. So I think it's an important, like you know, global issue and challenge that we should all be kind of working together in order to understand how can we create some common language that could lead to the same objective, assuming that we understood what the objectives are. Because as you were saying, you know, it's sometimes we struggle even to understand what is the right message we should bring. After you are aware, then what can you do? And sometimes normal people, like the large public, is not necessarily free to choose what is the best thing to do. Francesca, I would like to ask you the kind of almost like the same question. So if you work or ever worked with artist or photographer, what do you think should be the best medium to convey scientific data? And when we talk about scientific data, do you think like the data should be translated, or they should be open to interpretation for artist and photographer? Or what would be the best way to work together with artists, being a complete different way of dealing with the information and also spreading messages. And once the message is shaped and agreed, do you think what is the role of even other disciplines that could come into the picture and expand the message, understand the channels, define the language, as we were saying before, and again, reach the general public?
Yeah, I was very lucky because I was able to work on the theme of virtual water together with UNESCO when we produced this amazing cartoon made by cartoonist Steve Katz, and you can see it from the slide. This is just one part of the cartoon, and I was also able to see infographics revolving around virtual water and how virtual water was communicated. Me, myself, I tried to produce some infographics regarding Italy and virtual water in Italy, and how to quantify the fact that Italians consume 62 billions of cubic meters of water per year. It was impossible. So I tried to figure out how much was the annual discharge of the Po River, and then I realized that, okay, then I can say we consume 1.5 times the Po River. You know, it's always trying to communicate, always trying to make people imagine these huge quantities of water. I've always dealt with this problem, so it's really good to talk to you about this and to talk to someone else who is not in numbers, but who is in visual arts and visualization of science, because we really need to work together. And regarding photography, I am totally new to photography, but at the same time, I've chosen photography for this project in Cyprus, for example, to represent perception of water scarcity in Cyprus. From one point of view, let's say I was a little bit utilitarian, because here in Cyprus, there are communities speaking only Turkish and communities speaking only Greek, and I needed to translate the outcomes of the interviews that I will do to the local population in both Greek and Turkish, and then in English as well, to make both communities understand what the others have said. But this was not necessary with photography. If I only had photographers taking pictures and representing water scarcity according to their own perception, I could avoid languages. So this is why I approach photography at this time in life, and approach photography for representation of water scarcity. And I really don't know if it's more important to first understand the main message that I want to deliver, or if I would like to leave it to the personal and individual perception and creativity of the photographer. I cannot tell which one I would choose. I would like the photographer to be inspired by their own perceptions of water and their own interpretations, so to produce a potential of emotional learning.
Yeah, we discovered through the research we've been doing in the past, also through these workshops, that these talks, that obviously people are engaged when the image are able to convey emotional messages. So obviously the emotional connection is fundamental. I'm always intrigued, considering we talk a lot about the transdisciplinarity and working together. I guess it's a question. I don't know whether it's important to understand the question first, or look at the key message, and then allow photographers to freely express themselves. Otherwise, when sometimes it's too just emotional and without a definite action, because one of the topic we discovered as well is that when you bring people solutions, they are more willing to be engaged with the stories. Otherwise, it's just they can feel lost, just victim of their own emotions, and they don't know what to do about it. And sometimes they can turn on the other side. Which is another important thing to question when we work in this context of communication of climate change. Which leads me to the last question for Uwe, which is you are already working in a transdisciplinary approach, because you work with a lot of different disciplines. So in terms of visuals, because you said you are just a photographer, I think, you know, you've been you already have this transdisciplinary approach, which is really nice. I wanted to understand if you have an opinion about the types of aesthetics, because you've been also testing and experiencing with installation, but you have an idea of the aesthetics that you think could work better than other, or they work better or worse with what publics, and or if you have an idea what are the best channels that we need to use to convey the message to the large public, and if you think, you know, maybe inspiration or fear are the strongest emotions to make people act. What do you have an opinion about what will be the most impactful emotion to convey to the large public? And if you have a dream as a storyteller, please tell us.
I have like 5 hours, right?
No.
Okay, so yes, I mean the aesthetic question first. We have very often, so I started out as a photojournalist, right? And so there is a certain way of classical photojournalism. Our pictures are very classical magazine photography. That in the moment I put my toe into the art world, we were heavily criticized for over aestheticizing images, because there is a large and valuable discourse about that. But then on the other hand, is what I feel is that before I can hit people with complicated issues and things that they have to reflect on themselves, I have to lure them in and to somehow seduce them to actually start paying attention. And so I think that, and we see it in group exhibitions that we do, where the things that are intellectually really pure draw people in for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or the experts. But the lay people, the normal population, right? The people who are not art critics, they are actually staying for a few hours in our place. And it is because the pictures are in a way simple to understand. They're beautiful. You can just go there and feel good in the beginning. It's a little bit like dating, right? I mean, who goes on Tinder and looks for all the warm heart and intellect? You don't, right? You look for the beauty of the package, and then of course that's not how you build a relationship, right? All of that comes later. But so that's why I still believe that it's important to have a strong imagery that draws people and lures them into it. And so for a long time I really thought that providing enough information to people and the facts would be enough to make them act. And I don't think that's true anymore. I do believe that all the relevant knowledge and the technology to solve our eco-social crisis are right there. We do have that. There are certain technical things that might make it easier or better, but we have the knowledge and most of the tools. And so, but what is missing is like this fundamental behavior change in the population and politics and business. But for that, we actually have to create a kind of new social narrative. Like, what do we value in our system? What do we value as human beings? Like, is it the new iPhone, right? Is it the new Chinese best camera or whatever? And I believe that we do need a new kind of journalism for that. And you already asked, like, okay, so is it like fear or inspiration or hope or something? I mean, we know that fear is not a good driver of people to act in a positive manner. They just switch us off and that's it. And so one thing is now that what I'm trying to do right now, and that drives a little bit into this question of the dream, is like, so we as journalists, as photographers, as filmmakers, whatever, we go out and we talk to farmers and fishers and scientists and activists and politicians and indigenous people and the guy at the bar, right? And all of these people have opinions, and some of them have ideas for solutions. And so normally what we do, if we do a good job as a journalist, is we virtually connect those people when we write an article or when we edit a film. But in real life, they never meet, right? Because they move in very different circles. Like scientists often don't talk to, I don't know, politicians and farmers and so on, and activists against them all, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of competition and a lot of fights there. And we as journalists can be this bridge. So what would happen, and that is, I'd like to share my screen for a second here. What would happen if instead of just connecting those people virtually, after we do our story, after we went out and researched everything, if we would not stop there, but then we would go and connect all these different experts. And again, I see farmers and indigenous people as much as experts as somebody with a PhD. And then bring them together and create a kind of like community of practice, and then moderate solutions between those people. Because I believe that we as storytellers are really good in doing that. We are really good in asking right questions to the people we interview. And so if we would do that, I'm pretty sure that we would be creating new knowledge. We would be in the possibility to really creating real and tangible change. And we would also be changing the narrative from despair that I see in many regions all around the world to hope. And I think that that is one of the most revolutionary things that you can do. And so that's my dream. Like, and I call the things transition journalism. I'm working on a first project where I combine those things, and I'm trying to actually walk it and do it and try what comes out there.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing this insight. It's interesting. I partly agree with what you say. We're kind of almost like building a similar model, but like designers in per se, like as people that find solutions, have a lot of skills also to create this transdisciplinary model. So yeah, it's interesting that we are kind of heading towards a similar direction. Paul, I have a very last question. I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say if there are any questions from the audience, please put them in the Q&A box. We can go another 5 minutes or so if anybody has any questions. But why don't you ask your last question? But if anybody in the audience does have anything that they wanted to ask any of the panelists, please put your question into the Q&A box. But you know, you've been asking such fascinating questions, Maria Teresa. You've been doing it for us, I think. But yeah, please do go ahead.
Thank you. Now, the very last one was for both of you. I would like us to make an imagination effort in a way, one more dystopic and one more utopic. What will happen if one of these countries that now are the biggest food producers like California or China start considering the business not worth the risk of running completely dry, and they decide to produce only for internal consumption, or they decide to increase extremely the cost of this kind of production, making it not sustainable, not convenient for those countries that buy these products. So what will happen in your mind, in your opinion, for these people that import food, or the people that also produce food for the families and the local business? And the same question, what will be if the same scenario happens, what will be instead the most utopic scenario that will come out of this economic choice eventually? Francesca, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. Without being dystopic, this is still happening. During the first month of the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, it was evident then the crop import pattern of Egypt had to rapidly change, because Egypt used to import 80% of its crops from Russia and Ukraine. So we all understand how important is food dependency and mutual water dependency across countries. So global geography of food is in place and developing through a series of food regimes through time. This is what was saying Professor McMichael. And since virtual water is encapsulated in those food regimes, it will follow the same patterns of food regimes. So at the moment, our food regimes has global interdependencies, and so virtual water, but food future as well as water futures will depend on global geopolitical issues such as pandemics, conflicts, and global response to climate change and water scarcity. So this dystopic future is not that dystopic, and is already happening because, for example, Egypt has stopped exporting some kind of pulses because of its fear or not having enough food for its internal population. So unfortunately, the dystopic future is not dystopic at all.
It's already here.
It's already here. But I would like to add this sentence from Tony Allen. It was always showing that water wars are not there because of this existence of virtual water trade. So why there is no water wars in the Middle East and North Africa? And why this is not happening? Because virtual water is a catalyst of peace. This is what Tony Allen was always saying. So this is the situation of virtual water imports, and you see how thirsty we are in Europe. But this is also an Instagram and social media way of communicating how we can change our patterns, no? So I would like to show you this final picture, and I'm sorry that in the post it will not be possible, but Samantha Cristoforetti, the Italian astronaut, was saying we are all part of the same crew in our planet. So water is limited and we should use it wisely. And I really like the power of this round water drop with no gravity, and how fragile this water drop is. So I'll stop it here.
Thank you, Francesca. Uwe.
Wow, such a big question. I mean, yes, I mean, Francesca is absolutely right, because it's this, I mean, the 2008 food prices went up and countries stopped delivering food to each other. So we got this big food crisis in more than 60 countries, I guess it was. You had food riots all over the place, right? We had like all those things about eating like mud cakes and things in many countries. And then when that happened again in 2011, that's when the Arab Spring started, right? So when we very often as media report news about migrants coming from, let's say, Syria, and we call it like a wave of migrants, and oh, where this comes from. Well, what is behind that is that there was like a long drought in the region, and then people, like farmers, couldn't live anymore from their fields, so they all went to the cities. And when food prices went up, the government couldn't subsidize them anymore, and bang, you have a revolution. And so it's like, it's so important, and that is what we are trying with our work, is like not looking at the news of the day, because that is changing all the time, but at looking at the structural issues that will then 5, 10, 20 years down the road be news and lead to news. And so if we would be stopping this trade between nations, and if California would just do their own, first of all, it will never happen, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So it makes a lot of people happy and wealthy and so on and so forth. And it would be a disaster for many areas in the world. On the other hand, what I do believe needs to happen, and if we talk about the one thing that, and I might be wrong, again, I'm researching this and I'm always happy to learn more and learn that I haven't been right. But right now I'm thinking that the most important thing to do would actually be to stop food subsidies or like farming subsidies, especially like in European countries, in the United States, and so on and so forth, because there is not really a market happening, but it's totally distorted, right? So like the cotton subsidies in the United States press prices for cotton so much below the the production cost of farmers in Western Africa, that they cannot compete. Because water is basically free to farmers in California, you don't get almonds in Italy because they're too expensive, and so on and so forth. It's like when I'm in north of Germany, the sheep there, we cannot get the sheeps from the North Sea that are important for keeping the coast alive, because they are too expensive, and we get the sheep shit from New Zealand, right? And that has all to do with subsidies and trade. And I think that is the most important thing to change.
Yeah, very interesting. And again, because of course we here, at least we are trying to, in our own ways, to influence the policymakers, but also in order to do that, we need, you know, a critical mass to be built on a similar perception, understanding, sensibility about the topic. So it's always about, okay, what are we really, when talking about subsidies, okay, what can we tell people, you know, in order for creating a critical mass that will eventually lead to signing petitions, to work with policy makings. It's just like, it's always about, we can do what we can do from our perspective, but I think we should be working together on understanding how we can involve the public, how we can engage really with information, with emotions, with schools, with public space, and really get to involve millions of people, that they can create consensus around a certain political transformation. Thank you very much. It was really insightful to get to know you better and to share your view on things. I don't know if there are questions from the public.
We haven't got any, and I did ask for them. So I think you covered so much in the discussions there. I think you probably answered most of the questions. Certainly the ones I would have been asking were all answered, which is fantastic. So thank you very, very much to everybody, to Francesca, Uwe, and of course to Maria Teresa. That was a really fascinating, and I think a great example of how bringing together these different kinds of voices is a really powerful way to explore some of these really difficult but very productive questions that we're trying to engage with this series. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to the audience for attending, and we'll be posting the dates for the next in this series shortly. So thank you very much. And thank you, of course, to Seven Insider for hosting us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. On our website, everything is connected.eu. We will post the talks. You can already find the previous one on ocean acidification, and we will be publishing this one as soon as possible. There was just one comment from Jamie Carrera, which said, fantastic presentation, eye-opening. So thank you very much for you to joining us and for sharing so much information. Thank you. And I guess I don't know if you want to add anything, but I guess it was fantastic. Thank you so much, and we will talk soon.
Thank you so much. It was great meeting you.
Thank you.
Hope we continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to close the webinar now. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.